Hi, this is Eternal King here bringing you another LOR video today. I want to talk really quickly about why I don't typically play other people's decks. I'm one of the few probably, top tier LOR players that exclusively runs his own lists. I've done this since my out of card days, and far before that, I actually don't copy paste deck lists at all. I'm probably the only player in all of LOR that does that. What I will do, however, is in casual occasionally test people's decks to see if they are relevant, right? So like you take two decks, for example, in the same region combo, and you have something like my upgraded Tarek Poppy. Tarek Poppy is a pretty good deck. It has good buttons. It has a good combo finisher. It got upgraded with the likes of Veil Blessing. It has landmark removal, big mid-range units like blocking Badger Bear. Essentially, lots of, keeping things alive, and your typical Gentleman's Duel strikes and your formidable cards, and Magic Fettering to stall the ramp win con, and there's just like a lot of good buttons in this deck. A lot of good cards. A lot of really good cards in this deck specifically. It has a good solid mid-range curve. It's actually a perfect mid-range curve. It has really good spells with the likes of the buffed Blessing of Targon. Obviously, Veil's Blessing being a lot like Blessing of Targon, but just from one less mana. And then Golden Aegis obviously being your big combo win condition, your rally win condition that you always have in Poppy Taric. You always have Golden Aegis in Poppy Taric 100% of the time, because it allows you to target something and then double ramp and then win that way. So like this deck is really good. I played it before in other Eternal seasons. I played it in casual. I played it on ladder. It's a good deck. Everyone knows Poppy Taric is a good deck in Eternal. Then you take another deck that's a little more untested, and I just I can't make this work in Eternal. Right? So this is like Faded Pantheon. It just feels worse. Like in most ways, trying to bend over backwards to make a faded deck work feels worse to me than Poppy Taric. If you look at the card inclusions, there's a lot of jank in here, right? Saga Seeker was nerfed to a 1 mana 1/1 from a 1 mana 1/2, and that was huge for Saga Seeker's playability. That was a big hit. Then we got Sacrificial Scholar, which is now a 2 mana 1/2 with Faded. They're very careful with the Faded tag. And then okay, well that also feels kind of bad. And then you play Wounded White Flame, which is a 3 mana 2/3, and that also feels kind of bad, right? And it's yeah, you can slam Yumi on these things, you can slam Eula on these things, you can put high value equipment on these things, but at the end of the day, it just feels bad. It just feels bad, right? Compared to a kind of very competitive Poppy Taric list, Pantheon Faded just is in the same region combos, and it's just worse. Just objectively speaking, worse. But I saw people playing around with Light of Demacia in a Faded deck, and I was like, oh, okay, well maybe that's the missing piece that makes this archetype, Eternal viable all of a sudden. It's not really. Not really. It's not great. It's just another targeting effect that you could literally get any other way if you wanted to. So that's, me trying to pilot someone else's deck or trying to make it Eternal viable. It tends not to work out great for me because I don't understand the way that other people play this game and the way that other people build decks for this game. Another example is I tried piloting Malagos's Flash Bomb control because I thought that this deck at least looked okay in the surface level. All the pieces were there for this to not be complete trash, or be a complete card pile. I'll use the more polite word. All the pieces were there for this deck to not be a complete card pile, but it just turned out that in practice there are certain things missing from this deck that make it a viable control list. Specifically draw. There's very little draw in this deck, and all the draw that is in this deck is ubiquitous draw, right? So you play Fishmonger, that draws your opponent a card. Depending on the matchup, you're just beating yourself. And then you play Hexcore Foundry, and then you're drawing your opponent cards. And then depending on the matchup, you're just beating yourself. There's no shrooms in this deck. There's no Teemo. Therefore, there's no way to properly lethal out your opponent. So it just means that if your opponent has draw in their deck, which in Eternal, there is so much good draw, even if you ping everything on parity and vengeance everything on parity and whatnot, you'll actually be down on cards because your opponent can just draw more cards. This is Eternal we're talking about. Draw is very good. So essentially just removing everything on parity with flash bombs and pings and vengeances is not going to get you there if your opponent just draws cards. But again, in practice, this was one of the better, less card piley lists I've seen from the new age of LOR streamers, so I wanted to give it a shot. Again, no dice. Opponent will just draw cards. Most good decks run draw. And then all of a sudden, that's going to get rid of your flash bombs. It's also going to get rid of any chance you had of steam, of the free value you're getting from the pings, and also your opponent will just have more cards than you. So it's not good. It's not good. So usually when I play ladder, if I'm playing for real, I exclusively play my own decks. I play, my version of Ziggs Poppy, whatever version I'm feeling comfortable with. I run my version of Azir Aurelia, whatever I'm feeling comfortable with. My Swain Nora, my Temple, my version of Temple. There's very few lists that I just pick up from other streamers and just run as is, because they all feel fairly card piley. Like statistically, I'm sure running your Nasus deck like this, a little all over the place, is probably good, but there are a few things in terms of ratioing that I'm like, well, Armed Acquisitioner, like you're basically just playing that for the landmark removal, right? And then it's like, okay, well, Ravenous Butcher's a really good card. Why are we only on 2 Ravenous Butchers? And then I guess we're doing the draw fixing off the Forsaken Bakai. But then Fading Icon's a really good card. Why are we not on 3 Fading Icons? And then, you know what I mean? So, like, there are certain things with the way that this deck specifically is ratioed that would feel exceptionally awkward for me to pilot. It's like, okay, we have 3 Wings of the Wave, but only 2 Fading Icons. But, like, Fading Icon's the better card than Wings in the Wave, unless you're specifically just trying to chump out the board and let your own stuff die, which might be the case into Azir Aurelia in terms of, like, pure stats. But otherwise, it's going to feel awkward, right? It's definitely going to feel awkward. So yeah, stuff like that is kind of where I come in on other people's deck lists. So like if I'm not a big Thresh Nasus guy, but if I was to play Thresh Nasus competitively on ladder, and if I wanted to reach top 100, I would rebuild this in terms of ratioing that I like. Typically taking it from the card pile format and then doubling down on the good cards, whatever those may be, right? Obviously, I built out Emp Army to be the #1 played deck in Eternal, and when I built out Emp Army, you'll notice that there are certain key things that never leave the deck. So I was one of the few people who was hardcore on Defiant Dance. The Defiant Dance never leaves this deck. Obviously, stuff like Emperor's Dais and Emp Army never leaves the deck. You can ratio down on it, but it's never gone. So stuff like that is the hallmarks of this deck. Domination, Desert's Wrath. Like some of this stuff is auto-include, but I really do think that it was the Defiant Dance plus Emp Army, which made Azir Aurelia interesting to me and made it the #1 played deck in Eternal. That was my big contribution. It's just like, you can ratio this out however you want, and you can add as much tech as you want, but you will never take out Defiant Dance, and you'll never take out Emp Army. Not if you want the best version of the deck. That's just accurate. You need to be able to answer your opponent's mid-range champions or big mid-range threat cards by bouncing them. You have to, otherwise the deck has no play. You need Emp Army because Emp Army is amazing. Otherwise the deck isn't upgraded anymore. It's just old Azir Aurelia, which has a less significant win rate. So you'll see that when I build out decks, they tend to be built out very confidently. Because I actually know, when it comes to the Eternal format, how to build decks that win. Like that's just the thing at the end of the day, is that if I was to build out a Flash Bomb deck, it would probably be a Shrooms deck, right? Because I know that Shrooms, Teemo most specifically, has a better chance of burning the opponent out and actually winning games than, Caitlyn Kindred. And then I would also know that if I did want to play Kindred, I would more likely want to be on like a high roll Evelynn. I would rather be on a high roll Evelynn in terms of my personal ways to pilot Kindred, because Evelynn just can be a real hard thing to deal with when she comes down on 4. It requires very specific answers, and then sometimes she has elusive, and then she just steamrolls the game, implies so much pressure that it's hard to argue to use anything else. And also, you have access to things like Spectral Ironhound. The Spectral Ironhound is just a really good card. But yeah, I've had good success winning with this meme deck, which is Evelynn Kindred. I would probably prefer this over Caitlyn Kindred, just me personally. I think that this does more from a tempo perspective. It does more from a win-con perspective. It can actually, lethal opponents out and high roll keywords and actually play the video game. And plus having, all the same removal tools you really need, like your Death Grasps, your Hate Spikes, your Glares, your Crumbles, your Vengeances, like anything that you would want for bigger stuff is still there. Yeah. So what does other people's decks tend to bring to the table? Well, it is like interesting interactions, right? So like stuff like Legion of the Severed onto Caitlyn, I think that's actually a thing. Like that's the best thing this deck has going for it, is basically Legion of the Severed. You play Legion of the Severed on Caitlyn, you play Legion of the Severed on Fishmonger, you play it on Kindred. That's what this deck has going for it. The rest of this stuff like literally does not matter. It's, low tier best, best scenario. This is like low tier garbage. Probably does really well into tempo matchups like aggro, like Azir Aurelia. But then as soon as your opponent starts drawing cards in a mid-range shell, in a control shell, in a combo shell, they're just have more cards than you. So obviously answering things on parity does nothing, and then you draw them more cards, and that's bad. And then what does the Pantheon deck have going for it? Well, it's standard legal. It has that going for it, right? Like, this is basically a standard legal list, so that's why you would play it. There's really no reason why you would play Yuumi Pantheon, or, Light of Demacia Pantheon over a Poppy Taric deck. There's just no reason. Poppy Taric is just going to be better 100% of the time. It's going to be better on curve. It's going to be better on tempo. It's going to be better at burst responding to certain things, and it's going to be better at rallying as well. So just better creatures, better tempo, better burst responses, better champions, just better everything. And that's typically the unfortunate reality of Eternal, is that there are power levels of decks, and I talk about this a lot, where typically when standard players come into Eternal and they build something and they play something, it's not very good. And a lot of it just has to do with power levels, not respecting the power level of what is and is not a good Eternal deck. If you want to play Jack's set Prize Fight, you can do that. It is an Eternal deck. It's not standard viable, but you're going to have some struggles. You're going to have some struggles. There's no doubt that you will. That's just objectively true. If you try to play, Malagos Flash Bomb, you're going to have some struggles. You're much better off just building your own decks that are good and comprehensive and strong, and do the things that they're supposed to do. And if you do that, sometimes, you end up making a top tier standard list just by accident. Like, honestly, this was an accident that this became a 55% win rate deck in standard. I just wanted to build a good Eternal deck, and it just happened to be standard legal. It was purely on accident. And then it caught on, and now it's one of the top decks of the format, purely by accident. I was just building Nightfall the same way that I would build a top competitive Eternal deck, which was, what you should do. If you want real advice on all the top meta decks, I go through meta deck by meta deck in my last video about how to be, the top, if you want to be the top Eternal player this Christmas season. I go through all the top meta decks in terms of the decision making that you need to make, and the card, tech decisions you probably want to include to take these lists from like good to like, oh my god, I can't lose, right? But that's kind of the end of the video today. I just wanted to do a quick talk about, like, you won't see me playing other people's decks very often, because I don't think that they're good. I don't think that Prize Fight is the sleeper deck. I don't think that Pantheon is the sleeper deck. I don't think these are going to break Eternal. Whether it is like Sunny's deck, or whether it is whoever built this, or whether it is like Flash Bomb, Kindred, Control from Malagos. Like, these three decks I have because I'm curious about them, but not because I think that they're actually going to do anything, unfortunately. At the end of the day, if you don't have Teemo, you don't get to play Caitlyn. It's just kind of that universal truth about LOR. If you don't have a Teemo to burn out the opponent, and then you just don't snap the Karina for the burn lethal, you don't get to play the game. Yes, it's true, you get access to more comprehensive removal options, but you could also just like harsh winds them out to stall out the game and then burn them out. Like, it ends up being, really it's the turn 1 Teemo thing that matters. Turn 1 Teemo, putting in shrooms into the deck and then stalling out the opponent, whatever the most effective way you can do that. Like again, there's nothing forcing you into Freljord, specifically with Teemo Caitlyn. Like you can run the Malygos Flash Bomb list, literally card for card, and just have it be just not be on Kindred, because Kindred's not doing anything for you in that deck. Like that's so bad. Why would you do that? But yeah, you can still be on Vengeance, right? You're still on the Vengeance. So like if I was to rebuild his deck to be the most competitive version, it has to be Shrooms, and then we can also just keep all the good Shadow Isles removal cards that we want without memeing, right? We want Go Hard. We're going to want more draw, I think, to stable up this deck a little bit. Just more draw. Even if we draw cards for our opponent, it's fine, as long as it is draw, potentially putting the opponent in burn lethal range. Oh yeah, we don't get the P and Z draw. That's interesting. We could do Glimpse. I did like the Deathless. So I did like the Deathless. Like I said before, that was the best thing the deck could do. So like, we're talking about like, you know, really taking this deck and bringing it to the next level. If it is true that Shadow Isles P and Z is the way to go, then, yeah, why are we on Vandal City? We want to be on P and Z. So then we want the draw, Insider Knowledge is pretty mandatory, and then yeah, we can run all the same removal tech that we had before. There's nothing really stopping us. Boop, 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 boop. And then yeah, obviously like just Puffcat Peddler, Chump Womp, a clump of Wumps, just like cards that generate value in a Shrooms deck is super nice to have. Allowing you to fight on board a little bit more than usual. And then the other big card was, okay, just in case you want to do the Flash Bomb thing, Piltover Peacemaker, right? So it's basically Go Hard, Teemo, Clump of Wumps, Caitlyn, Insider Knowledge, Hexcore Foundry, Legion of the Severed, Piltover Peacemaker, Puffcat Peddler, Charlatan, Fishmonger, Chump Wump, Karina, Vengeance, and then just like one more tech card, whatever it is you want. Typically you want Mystic Shot in there, so then I might, you know, drop the Clump of Wumps because I don't think it generates enough value as a 2-mana 2/2. Really depends. Yeah, this is basically it, right? This is basically it, and then we'll just include, he had one extra 2-mana ping in there, so high note. And then Karina's going to be better with, specifically because there's Shrooms in the deck now, so Karina's going to be much, much better. So I'd rather just have the 3 Karinas, to be honest. And then, yeah, the one high note's fine. Just like one extra ping. It's fine. Or alternatively, you could do like one Glimpse, right? So it's just like going to be like your one tech card is either going to be one Glimpse or one high note, and it's just going to kind of depend on the situation. Specifically in this deck, because we already have 3 Insider Knowledges, you're probably on the one high note. But yeah, like this is the deck, right? This is like improved Malygos Flash Bomb control. Is you just, why are you on Kindred? There's no reason for you ever to be on Kindred specifically in this deck. There are decks where Kindred really benefits. It's decks that have a lot of sack fodder, and those are the only decks, right? So like I talked before about how Evelyn Kindred is actually a real Eternal deck because it generates infinite sack fodder, and that means that it's very, very easy to trigger Kindred in an advantageous manner. And then also it's much easier to slow roll the Kindred because you're presenting a bigger threat. But yeah, no, this is better. Just run the Teemo. Turn 1 Teemo, force the opponent to spend resources to remove the Teemo while shuffling in Shrooms, and then go for, you know, a big Karina lethal finish afterwards. And yeah, overall this is going to feel better. You're still going to have the Flash Bombs. You're still going to have the Deathless. You're still going to have all the things that the deck does well, but you're going to have Shrooms. So you can lethal the opponent and actually win the game. There's no world where this isn't better. Why would you ever, and this is the thing about like other people's decks and memes that I talk about, where it's like, why would you ever not just run Teemo if you have Teemo? Like, there's no reason not to. Kindred offers nothing for this deck. He literally doesn't. He's just going to be an easy, expensive target to get removed. Replace Kindred with Chumpawump and then Teemo, and then you have enough Shrooms to win the game in most instances. Obviously, Puffcat Peddler doing well with things like Go Hard and Mystic Shot and High Note and all your draw and things like that and all your pings. And so also you're getting more value from the spells you'd be casting anyway. Universally, this is just better. A little heavy on 3, but that's just, you know, that's just Teemo Caitlyn in general. These are just all cards that we need to have. Yeah, this looks good. So, like, this is typically my process. So upgraded Flash Bomb Control. So, you know, this would be playable to me. Specifically this, which is just universally better than what we had before. Universally better. There's no world where this is not better. Where you actually are able to fully control out the opponent, but then you're also able to properly lethal them with your Karina play. Because without that, the deck is just missing too much. This is Eternal King, signing out.